This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so yeah, quickly to come back. So what did we see yesterday? So yesterday we saw that if you want to work, you are going to typically have a central workspace. So from that central workspace, you are going to create a copy of your own workspace. And inside that workspace, you will modify the changes, commit the changes, and based on your need, you're going to push. And if you want to update your workspace, you're going to do pull. So this is what we were trying to understand. But now let's go back to the diagram that I was trying to show you. So in every Git workspace, so when I say workspace, I'm talking about the client workspace that you will be using, not the central workspace. So you will be typically having three areas. So the three areas will be working directory, staging area, and repo. Okay. Now, what happens? Okay, let me just put some colors. Ooh, it's too much. Okay. Now, when you are working, so far, what did we do? We created some file or modified some file here, and we try to put into the staging area. Okay, that please try to understand. And then this is done by using git add command. Then when you say git commit, it comes here. And for every commit, what did we do? There was some number which were getting created, right? I'm just going to put it roughly like this. So all the commits were getting stored here. And then what did we do? Something similar. We had a central repository, correct? So let me just name it local workspace, and we have our central repository. So what happened? Once we do the changes, we were trying to push from our local repository to the changes into the central repository. So this is what we learned. Okay. Now, let's go a little deeper. Now, what exactly happens in this is your changes, whatever that you are trying to do, okay, is not actually getting stored into the repository directly. Okay. Now, what do you mean by that is all the commit IDs are stored inside repository. Okay, I agree, but it is not getting stored directly inside a repository. So typically, there is one more layer on top of it, and this is where all your changes are actually stored, or all the commits are stored inside it. And this layer is what we call it as a branch. Okay, so now the question might come, what is a branch? And why is that I have to store? Because the concept of any version controlling system is anything that you're storing inside your repository as a commit or a version is not getting stored directly. There will be one more layer, which means it has to be definitely on a layer called branch. So that is where, knowingly or unknowingly, so far that you are working, what it was getting stored, it was stored as a branch. So now, what is branch? Why do we exactly need this branch? So to understand, this is where I typically told the bank example again. Now let's say you wanted to create an account in a bank. Okay. So if you go to an account, there are many branches available in it. So you have to select a particular branch, and in that you have to create an account. Even if you are going to have a corporate account, the person will come, or the representative from the bank will come to you. But understand, whatever the signature that you're trying to put and the forms that you're filling will be for a particular branch. Okay. Now, why do we have to do? Because it will be easy for us to track all the people respect to a company or a area, right? Okay. Can you please mute Jaya? Okay, so what happens is, in a bank, you need a branch, only then you will be able to track everything properly. Same way, when you are doing a transaction, you add the details about the other account. So anytime if you are adding the account, what does it specify? So you specify the branch name, right? That is where you call something as IFSC code or any other code that you're referring. So what does exactly it point? It points to a branch in a bank. So typically, any transaction that is happening is not just between bank to bank, but in the bank with respect to a branch to another branch, because it gives complete freedom to handle everything. The same way, when you even create any company or a bank, by default, there will be a first branch created, right? So that branch is what they call it as main branch or head office, whatever it is. The same way, when you create a repository, inside a repository, there will be a layer created, which is called as branch. Okay. And by default, all the commits that you're going to do will be also available in this. But going forward, the flexibility of the version controlling system or Git is you can create multiple branches so that you will be having a copy of that entirely in your repository, and you can use that to do the changes. So that is where, for organizing and managing everything, any version controlling system, including Git, will store all the versions inside a layer called branch. Okay, that way, when you create a repository, by default a branch will come, and in Git we call that branch as master branch. Okay, just like how I said, in a bank, whatever the first office they create, they call it as main branch or headquarters. The same way here in Git, when you created a central repository, if you have not noted, if you go back and see, there was one layer already called as master branch. Okay, so let's go back here. So this is the repository. You can see along with the commit IDs, there was something called branch. And this is the branch in which we were storing everything. And when we try to do a clone, now remember what we did as a clone, we are getting the entire repository. That is where you also got the branch inside your repository, because if in your cloning a repository, whatever is available you will get. And that is how in our workspace, whatever that we were working, right? So if I go back to my workspace that I used yesterday, so we use two workspace 1 and workspace 2. Now I can go to any one of them. You can see by default we were trying to store everything here. So that is how all the commit IDs that you are going to do, remember going forward, it will be in a branch, and the default branch that we have is called as master branch. Now, when is it useful? Now, it is useful because now let's assume you started working on a branch. Okay, now the default branch is master branch. So all the commits that we did is available here. But in real time, what happens is, same project, you might be interested. Okay, there's just a minute. Yeah, there's some network disturbance. So what happened is, when you try to work on a release, there might be parallel releases happening at the same time. So you might have to require to write different content for the same file, or for the same project, multiple files has to be modified at the same time. So that's where what we are going to do is, we are not going to do all the changes directly in the file, because let's assume I told you like we are working on a calculator application. Now, for example, let's say initially we thought of creating the calculator application for Android mobile. Working, the organization also thought that we have to do the release on Windows based mobile or iOS mobile. So then what will happen? Now I have to modify the file to get some functionality for one release, that is Android release, and I have to work on another release called iOS release. Now for both of them, the file might be same, or different files, but contents might also be same or different. So this is how, when you have a scenario in which same product, you are going to have different files, different contents, how are you going to maintain everything? So that is where we are going to use the branch, which is nothing but a layer. So this way, in our repository, we can create how many ever branches that we want. So typically, a branch is nothing but copy of the existing stuff. Okay. So now let's assume for my initial work, I use the master branch. But now when the organization told me that, okay, you will also be part of another project called iOS release, then let's assume that I created another branch, and using that, what I'm going to do, any changes now that you do in a branch will be available only in the branch. Okay, so try to understand. So any changes that I do in a branch will be available in a branch. So this way, when I'm working, I can choose in my workspace which branch that I want to work, and based on that, I can modify and store everything in the branch. Okay, now first I'll talk about local, then I will go to the central repository. So what is the meaning? Now if you understand, anything that you store in Git as a commit ID should go into a branch. Now in that branch, anything that you modify will be available in that branch only. Like this, you can have multiple branches, and we can do parallel development in this way so that it doesn't get mixed by default. So when you are working, what you can do now is you do some changes and you can put it specifically into a repository. Now, when I say the repository, it's again to your local repository, but in that, which branch that you want to put. So how in real time it works is, so far we didn't had multiple branches. So there was only one branch. So that is where, as soon as you go to the working directory, the default branch was master branch. So you don't have to tell anything to the Git. So by default, whatever you modified, everything was going into the master branch. Okay. However, from now onwards, you need to know that you will be having more than one branch. Again, how many branches? That's up to us to decide. That is what I'll talk about later on the branching concepts. But now just assume that if there is a branch, you have to tell to Git on which branch you have to work. So that way, now let's assume now I have created another branch, and if I want to tell the Git, hey, I want to work in this branch, then what Git will do, Git will try to show you only the content of that particular branch. Okay, so to understand, let's take this. Let's say that first I have these two files, and now I created a new branch called iOS. Now even in this branch, initially I had only two files. Okay, now, but let's assume I also created another file called 3.java. Now it is available only in the iOS branch. So when you are working, if you tell to Git that you want to work on the iOS branch, what Git will do is Git will remove the current content from the working directory. Because if you go back to basics, I told working directory is nothing but a folder where you will be seeing the files. Okay, so now if I tell to Git, I want to see the content of iOS branch, then what will it do? With respect to the commit IDs that you have, it will try to take the content and it will show you here. So this way, now you will be seeing the contents in the working directory related to a branch. And once you modify, you put into staging area, but when you try to commit, it will go and store as a commit ID inside the respective branch, which is iOS branch. Next, if you want to work on this branch, then you have to tell to Git, hey, I'm not interested on iOS now, I'm interested on master. Then what will it do? Once again, it will try to remove the content of your current branch, and it will try to take the content of the branch that you are interested, and based on that, what commit ID you are referring, and accordingly it will be showing the content. So this way, when you are trying to work on a branch, it will show you only the changes in the branch, and the changes that you do and commit will be going to the respective branches. Okay, so that is what you will be doing in real time. And how do you tell the Git to exactly point to the changes or exactly which branch you want to work? That is what we call it as checkout in Git. Because so far we didn't use the word called checkout, because going back to the basics again, checkout is nothing but a process where you are trying to take the content from repository and you are seeing it inside our workspace. So that way, now we need to understand checkout is not only from repository. Checkout means taking the content from a branch in a repository and seeing it. And why didn't we do so far? Because there was only one branch, so we didn't had to tell the default checkout. But now when you have more than one branch, then you have to tell. So that's where, suppose if I have to now work on iOS branch, what I should do, I should say checkout iOS branch. Then what it will do, whatever the current folder contents is there, right, it will remove, and then it will show as the content of the iOS branch. Same way, now if I again say checkout to master, it will remove the content and it will show you the content of the master branch. So that's how you will be doing checkout of a branch, and then you will be seeing the content based on that. And when you modify and store, you are going to store into that particular branch only. So that is how your repository will be actually further divided into layer called branches, and this is the layer in which you are going to store your commit id. So there is one step we are going further. So far we were talking about only repository, but now inside the repository you will be having a branch, and all the commit ids must and should be available in a branch. Okay, now this first clears you that what is a branch and why do you need a branch. Okay, but in real time, if you understand, when you are creating a branch, Git gives you two ways of creating it. Now if I want, I can create a branch in the central repository, so that if anyone clones, what will happen, everyone will be getting the same branch. Okay, so this is the regular behavior. All the other tools, whatever you have worked, what is that you're going to do? Now let's assume that I'm creating a branch here. Okay, I'm just calling a branch, release branch. So if I create a branch here, and if I make a clone of my repository, then in my workspace also I am going to get the same branch. This way, if you want a branch to be used by everyone, then you are going to create the branch in the central repository. Okay, this is what every one of us would have been doing using any of your old tool like Subversion, TFS, Clearcase, Perforce. But what is the flexibility which Git is giving? Now if you understand, since you are getting a complete copy of your repository, you can also create your own branch, and that will be available only within your repository. So this gives the flexibility to develop in a better way, because if I'm trying to do some POC, I don't have to create a branch and keep pushing it. So I can create a branch inside my repository only, and I can modify everything, and I can store, and I can switch between branches, and I can modify and keep testing everything, and when I need, I can share. So this is how the benefit of Git, which is the third point I was been telling, that is parallel development, right? So now if you understand, in Git you can create as many branches as you want in your local repository. So you don't have to ask the admin to create in the central repository. But the difference is, if you are creating a branch in your repository, only you will have that branch, no one else will have. So you can use it for your development or testing purpose. But if branch, and that is the branch in which we were working. Okay. Now, how do I see the branches available in your workspace? So if you go ahead and just say git branch, it will try to show you the branch in which you are currently working and all the branches available. So if you go to the workspace, and in this workspace, if you type git branch, you can see it shows that there is a branch called master, and this is the only branch available. Okay. Now, it is the same if I again go to the second workspace that we had. Even in this, you can see there is only one branch available, and this is the branch that we are trying to work. Okay. Now, all the commit IDs that you were seeing, everything was from this particular branch only. Okay. So all the commit IDs that you're seeing here, this is with respect to this branch. So if I have to create a branch, how do you create a branch? So we have a command for that, which is git branch and then the new branch name. Okay. So now, when you say branch, why do we call it as a branch? So there is again a meaning for that. So the word called branch, right, generally comes from the plants or the trees. So if you go back to that and understand, when a tree or a plant comes up, right, there is one branch which is default, and this branch is what we call it as trunk. Okay. So this is where, if you are using Subversion or similar tool, you will not call it as a master branch or a main branch, you will call it as a trunk, because trunk is the first branch which gets created along with the repository. So that way in Git we call it as master branch. But in a tree, let's assume that this is an apple tree. If a branch comes out, it can come from anywhere, correct? Now, whatever the properties that you have in the trunk, it is going to come to the same. That means if it is an apple tree, you can expect the same apple tree to be here, and you will be able to get the fruit from this. So like this, you're going to have different branches from different places. So that way, if you want to create a branch, always there should be a parent branch for that. That is the logic I'm trying to tell. Because forget about the trunk. Other than the trunk, for every branch that you're going to create in a tree, definitely it needs a branch, which is the parent branch. So if you look at this branch, the parent branch is the trunk. And for this branch, parent branch is the trunk. Now for this branch, what is the parent branch? This one. So this is how, if you want to create a branch, definitely there has to be a parent branch. So in the similar concept, if you come, whenever we created a repository, there will be a branch here, correct? That is master branch. So now, if I create a branch, definitely I have to create a branch from the master itself, because this is the parent branch available for me. So that way, now if I create a branch called iOS, I will be creating on top of the master branch, something like this. But remember, just like how I told in the tree, whatever the properties of the trunk is going to come to this branch, same way in the Git, inside the branch, what you have? Commit IDs. So that is where, suppose, let's assume we are currently working, and in the master branch, there are 3 commit IDs. Okay. And now, if I create a branch from this level, okay, because right now I have 3 commit IDs, and if I say create a branch called iOS branch, then what Git will do is, it will create a new branch exactly with the copy of whatever is available on the parent branch. So after I create iOS branch, if I see in the iOS branch also, I will be having all this commit IDs. Okay, because it is just creating from it. But going forward, if I do any commit on the iOS branch, it is going to be available only here. Same way, if I do a commit on the master branch, it will be available only here. So remember this concept. So you cannot just randomly create a branch. You need to create a branch based on another branch. Okay, so that way now if I say I am working in Git, definitely that means in your local workspace you are pointing to some branch, and in that branch only you are doing the checkout, git add, git commit, git log. Everything is working because you are referring to a branch. So all those commands that we did yesterday, right, everything was on a default branch. The same way now, if you understand, if I have to
Uh,
create a branch, I need to run this command called git branch
excuse
and new.
ex- excuse me, Adam. How come the commit 5 happened? Like, so we don't we get the commit 5 in the feature branch? I mean, like the child branch.
No. I was just trying to give an example. Suppose if I have checked out the master branch and I modified something, you will get a new commit ID, right? Just to show you that you know the difference between the number, because again, if I put C4 here, it might be confusing for you. So that's the reason I was just trying to show you. So you will be getting a unique ID, which is commit ID. So that depends on which branch you are trying to commit. So that way, the example that I was trying to tell here is, if you do a new commit on iOS branch, you will get a commit ID. Same way, if you do a commit on the master branch, it will get a unique commit ID.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thanks.
So now what I was trying to tell you is, if I have to run this command, where am I running? Because if you come here in your workspace, whatever the command you are running from a branch only, because that is where it was trying to show you the files, it was trying to show you the commit IDs based on that. So now if I run the command called git branch, okay, and let's say iOS, then I'm creating a new branch from the master branch at which level? So that is where, quickly if I say this, so you can see there are 4 commit IDs. So I am trying to create a new branch from this commit ID, so that the new branch, whatever we are going to get, will have everything similar until this level. But after this, anything that you store in the master branch will be only in the master branch. Anything that you store in the new branch will be on that branch. Okay. So now watch. If I say git branch and iOS, and let's go back and say git branch, you can see it shows there are 2 branches and it is only in our repository, and star represents we are still pointing to the master branch. So how do I go from one branch to another branch? This is when we have to use the checkout command. Okay, so you're going to say git checkout and the branch name. Okay, so what will git do? Git will just switch. That is what I was telling you here. So if I now from master tell git checkout to iOS, it will remove the content of master and show me the iOS. But initially it will look similar, but as we do some changes, you can see the difference. So watch this.
Hello, Adam. There is one question from my side. Uh, on first lecture, we have told the meaning of checkout as taking the data from central repository to local repository. But now here we are telling that the data from we have to check out from the master branch to another branch. So we are doing the checkout. What is the difference between the two?
Okay, I think you have to revisit what I said. So I first told you the terminologies where in other tool you are trying to take a checkout from a central repository to your local workspace. So that way there is no local workspace, I mean no local repository in other tool. So that way still it's the same meaning. Checkout means take the content from repository and put it into your workspace. Okay, but
Okay.
in Git you have a local repository itself. So that is where first you do a clone which will copy the workspace, and then when you say checkout, where is the repository? In your local workspace. So that is where you don't say checkout in that way, because in other tool there is no repository, there is only one repository. So you have to do a checkout which will get you the files. Same thing is here, but you are doing all of them inside your repository. Okay, so that is where which branch you want to see is what we call it as checkout in Git.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
So now when I say git checkout and branch, see what happens? It is switching the branch. And now if I go ahead and say git branch, you can see I'm working on iOS. However, what exactly we are seeing is not the content of the master branch, but the content of iOS branch. You can go ahead and say git log also. Everything will be similar because that's what I told. When you create a branch, by default, it will be making a copy of everything from the parent branch. Now, let us do some change and see where exactly it is going to be available. Okay, so now remember, where am I? In the iOS branch, right? So watch this. We will quickly create a new file. Okay, and I will put it something called file in iOS, just a dummy file. Let's not worry about the content. And again, it's the regular basics. So we'll go ahead and say git add and git commit. Okay, so now you have added the file, and the file is available in the iOS branch. And because of that, if you look at git log, you can see the latest commit ID what we have is 900. Okay, so just remember this 9004. So now for any purpose, if I have to switch my branch, all I have to do is git checkout and the branch name. So watch this very carefully. This is what I was telling you. When I switch, it will remove the content of your working directory and show the content of your previous branch or the branch that you want to show. So now in this, okay, I'll just clear the screen for a minute. Okay, now see git checkout. Okay, and let's say master. It switched to master branch. How do I confirm? You can say git branch, as well as here it clearly shows you which branch you are working. And now if I do ls, you can see that that file itself is not there. And not just that, if you go ahead and say git log, you will never see the commit ID also, because all the commit IDs are specific to a branch. So that is how you can choose a branch and it will be available only in that branch. Same way, if I do some changes on this branch, it will be available only on this branch. Let me show you that quickly again. Now here I will create a file, okay, and I'll call it file in master, and we will add it here, git commit. So this is a new file which we added, and because of this, if you do a git log, so now here you can see there is a commit ID called 8E0F. Okay, now watch this. What happens if I switch? If I say git checkout iOS, so it switched to this branch. So obviously I should not be seeing the file. You can see the difference. So this is how you switch the branch and you will be able to see only the content. So this way, the benefit, if you understand in Git, if there are many people working for different releases on the same product, we don't have to mix. Things can happen in parallel, right? So that now, let's assume if I am working on iOS release, then I will use only this branch. And if someone else wants to work on a different release on a different content, then there will be a different branch. So that's where we are going to actually create multiple branches in Git. And with the help of the branch, we will be doing the work. Okay, so now your workflow is changed a little bit. So that is, first, if you want to work, you need to know what is the repository you're part of. Okay, and in that, Anilam, can you- okay. Now in this, what would happen is you have to choose your repository, but real time, you're not going to do anything in the master branch. Now, because of that, any work that you are going to do will actually happen on a separate branch. So that is where first you need to know which repository, and in that which branch you want to work. And then once you do the clone, you will say git checkout and go to that particular branch and then do all the work that you want. And that way you will continue to do the changes and commit and store all the changes in the respective branch. Okay, so remember, this will be the actual workflow, so that you should create a branch and work. Okay, so this is first level that you need to know. Now, okay, now this at least gives you some clarity, okay, that I need something called as branches. But what about next? Now let's take the same example. I created a branch called iOS branch. I modified everything and I committed, and it is available in my repository. Okay, well and good. Next, what is that I'm going to do? Next, I need to share it with the group that is on the central repository. So that is where, if you want to share, then you are going to say git push. Okay. So now when you enter git push, it would not work. Why? That is where, let's go back and revisit what we saw and understood in Git. So when I say git push, I told you git push means whatever the commit IDs which is not available in the central repository is being taken from your local repository and pushed to the central repository. Yes, that is correct. But if you understand one more step ahead of it, what you need to know is, where is the commit ID stored? Commit ID is stored in the repository, but where exactly in the repository? In the branch. So that is where, when we were trying to push, you are not pushing the changes just from your repository to central repository. You are actually pushing the changes from a particular branch in your repository to the same branch in the central repository. So that is where, how did it work yesterday was, we were using the default branch called master, and this was actually obtained from the central repository. So in the central repository also we had this branch called master, because when we cloned we also got, and by default all the changes yesterday we did went into the master branch. And when we did the push, we did the push from the master branch of our repository to the master branch of the central repository. So that is how push works. Now, why we didn't tell anything so far? Because we use the push dot default is simple. That is where, without worrying much, it helped us to push from our repository in the branch where we are working to the same branch in the central repository. Okay. So now, what will happen in this scenario? So this is where what we are trying to do now is, we are trying to have a branch which is available only in our repository. Okay, so this is where, when I'm trying to push, by default Git is expecting that there is a branch which is exactly available in the central repository, because push is going to happen from my iOS branch to the iOS branch in the central repository by default. Now because of this, you can see there is no branch called iOS in the central repository. But anyway, I wanted to show you because of this meaning. So now if you understand, as you are working, if you want to push, then you need to make sure the same branch is available in the central repository. So that is where, if a branch has to be used by everyone, see, why should I push something to my central repository? Because everyone should refer, and that is what you are going to use it for release. Then you should first create the branch in the central repository. Okay. However, the branch that we created here is for our local purpose. So that is where, when you say push, it will check for the same branch in your repository to the same branch in the central repository. Okay. And now, anyway, there's a question that I will answer along with it. In your organization, for one project, you are going to have one central repository. That is, for one product, you are going to have one central repository. So that way, if you are working for any release for that product, you are going to refer to that central repository. So you are not going to have two central repositories unless and until it's very a weird scenario or it's completely an advanced scenario. If not, you are going to have one central repository. From that, many local copies you can make, modify, and push. But however, we will talk about that scenario where how will I push to some other branch or some other repository. But anyway, the default workflow which you are going to do is you modify and push it to your central repository, and the branch that you have created, from that you are going to push to the central repository. So that is where yesterday it worked for us, because master was here and master was there on the central repository also. Okay, but how will we solve this scenario now? Now this is where there is only one possibility, that if I create a iOS branch on my central repository, then I can push from my branch to the central branch. But the meaning of central repository is whatever you do, first you should do it here. Only then you should come to your local repository. Because if many people have to use, then do it in the central repository. So this way, for a branch which a developer creates in his local repository, we should not be allowing it to do. Because if you do, then this becomes your regular or the centralized model of working. Because the whole concept and benefit of this Git as a distributed is you should be having your flexibility to modify and then share the changes accordingly. So that's when the best practice is we are not allowing any branch to be created on the local, and that you should push it to the central repository. So if you create here, use it for your own purpose. But how do I solve this concept? So this is where the only way, based on the current work what we did, if I put the content into the master branch, then from the master branch I can push it to the master branch, right? So that is where if you want to push something from one branch to another branch, then what we go through is a concept called merge. Okay, now one of the example that I am giving you now is if you want to do a change and share between different branches, then what you are going to do is what we call it as merge. Like this, for a product level also, when people are working on different releases on different branches, when you want to release everything together, at that time also you might have to take content from one branch and put it into the other branch. Okay, so you need to understand the logic is, if you want to put the content of one branch to another branch, then we have to do something called as merge. But why you are doing it, that is where we need to know, is it something that I am trying to share the files or the functionalities of the product from one branch to another branch, or like what I am saying in my example, I don't have this branch in the central repository, so I will merge it to the branch which is available, which is the master branch, so that if I merge, whatever the commit IDs I have here, everything will come into my branch, and from here I can push it to the central repository. So that way, merge means take the content of one branch and put into the other branch. Okay, so how do you do it? So if you have to do the merge, then first you have to say git merge, and then you are going to tell the source branch. Okay, and then you are going to say the destination branch. So it is not exactly like push, but typically what the merge will do is whatever the commit IDs which is available in the source branch and which is not available in the destination branch, it will merge together, so that when you go back and look into the destination branch, all those commit IDs and the files which were not available will be visible. Okay, so now when you are doing it, it's again a good practice that you always go to the destination branch and from there you run the command. Okay, so in my example, I'm trying to do a merge and I'm doing the merge in my repository. Remember, it is not going to be available in the central repository. Anything that I'm doing in my workspace is going to reside in my workspace only. Okay, the same way I can also do the merge in central repository also. Okay, now if I do this, then what will happen? Whatever the changes that we are trying to do, will be available on the central repository. So that is where you need to know where you are trying to merge and what and all you are trying to merge. But anyway, we are trying to merge in our local workspace from iOS branch to master branch. So that way, the source is nothing but iOS branch and the destination is master branch. And like I said, if you want to do this, then go to the destination branch, which is the master branch. So I'll just clear the screen. Just say git checkout master. Okay, so now you are in the master. Just to show you, look at the commit IDs and you can see the file. Okay, so now here if I say git merge and the source branch is iOS and destination branch is our current branch. So that's where if I leave it empty, then the current branch will become the destination branch. Okay, so that way I don't have to tell the destination branch. So now what will it do? Whatever is the commit IDs which is available in the source branch, it is going to get that to the master branch, which is what we call it as merge. So watch what happens now. So internally, it is actually trying to do a commit, because when you say you are adding something to a branch, how will you add it? Only when you modify and do a commit. So internally, merge is nothing but it is taking the content of the source branch and adding it to the destination branch. So that is where it is going to create a commit for that also, because it has to track everything. That is where whenever you do a commit, we used to generally give -m and a message, right? But here the merge command is calling the commit command, and that is where we have not passed the message. So instead of that, it is trying to open up a file and asking us, go ahead and put some message, whatever you need. And this will be the default editor in your machine, which will be VI editor. Okay, so I will just save the file. So this is the VI editor command to save the file, so that I'm just taking the default message, which is merge branch. So now what happened? We merged the branch from iOS to master. Now end of it, now if you do ls, you can see the file is available, and go ahead and do a git log. You can see this is the commit ID that we had, but before that we had this commit ID from iOS branch. So it has taken it, plus for merging it has created a new commit ID as a tracking purpose. So that is how I will be able to know, okay, this commit ID was obtained because someone merged. Now why it has to do this way is, now let's assume if this commit ID is not available, then at some point of time, whatever the IDs that you have in master branch and iOS will be exactly the same. So if you want to know who actually introduced the file, in which branch we introduced it, we will not be having an idea. So that is where in this it will be very clear, okay, this was not available earlier, but we obtained by saying a merge from the iOS branch, and this was originally available in iOS branch. So that is how we will be knowing, okay, so looks like someone has merged the content from iOS to this branch. So the original content is coming from iOS branch. So this is how we will be able to know who did it and how we did it. Okay. Now,
Sorry, Adam, I have one small doubt.
Yeah.
See, here you merged it from the iOS branch, and you merged the iOS branch to the master branch. So in that same way, do we have to, whenever if we are merging, do we have to be in that in the destination branch or in the source branch? Is it like that, or can we be in any either if we execute that command git merge in from master, or can we execute it from the destination, or it should be from the source only? It has to be initiated. Yeah.
you can do that, but it's just a best practice, because once again, try to understand all this thing you are doing from your local workspace. Sometimes what happens when you are trying to merge, it might not take it properly. So that's where, as a best practice, we always say go to the destination branch and do it. But as you understand in real time, merging from your workspace will be very, very less. So you are going to do the merge in the centralized repository. Now for that, you are going to use the UI tool completely. Okay, but anyway, as I said here, if you are working as a regular user, these are the things where we call that you should be knowing how Git works. This is from the client side. And yes, it's a best practice to go to the destination branch and then run so that it picks up the current branch as the destination branch. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So
Madam, I have a question. Like when I'm doing this git merge iOS, I'm getting a message like already up to date. So
yeah, when you get up to date, that means both are having the same commit IDs. Looks like you haven't done any change. So go back and see, is it a new branch which you created? Is there any changes that you have done, or have you already merged and there is nothing difference? Because just like push, I told you, merge means take the content which is not available in the destination branch from source branch, and then you're going to put it up. Okay, so that's what the message clearly tells you. There is no difference.
Hi,
okay.
this is Suresh here. Hello.
Yeah.
I have small doubt. Can we merge the iOS to master? Can I enter into the iOS branch to? Can we apply this command? Git merge.
Yeah, you do. That is what I meant. The command is git merge source branch and destination branch. You can do that, but there are some times you might get into some conflict. That is where we just prefer that go to the destination branch and run. If not, you can run this command from anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, when you are doing a merge, whatever we saw is a simple merge, because when you merge, whatever is not there in the destination, it took from the source. So that way, this file was not available in the destination branch, and the corresponding commit ID it easily took up. But many times what will happen, you will have the same file available in both the places, and when you are trying to merge, which content it should take. So that is where conflicts will be coming up. Okay, so now how do you resolve that conflict? Then this is where you need to know, are you doing a merge on your local workspace? So if you are doing it on local workspace, that means you are more of a developer. Then you need to understand what files it is trying to show the conflict and then fix it accordingly. But if you are trying to do the same from the central repository, wherein you are not the actual developer of that product, it's more of administration you are doing, then you need to work with the owner or whoever knows about that file or who has modified recently. You need to work with them. But let me just show you how do you resolve that. So for understanding, now what I will do, in the same iOS file, okay, now we don't have anything here, correct? So what I'll do now, in this, I will add one line called master. Okay, and let me just add and commit. Now because of this, you can see that in the master branch, the file has a content called master, and based on that, okay, now this is where I don't want all the commit IDs. I just want to see only the latest 2 commit IDs. You can see now it has created a new commit ID called D32. Okay, so watch this. Let's switch the branch to iOS branch again. Git checkout. And now you will be seeing the commit IDs and everything respect to this. And here, if you open the file, you will not have anything. Now in this, I'll put the line called iOS. Now let's go ahead and add this. So because of this, now the same file has one line called iOS in this branch, and correspondingly, you have a commit ID, okay, which is different. So now let's go back to our master and try to do the merge. So watch this now. So if I say git merge and the source is my iOS branch and the destination is master, so I'm just going to leave that. So git will clearly tell you what are the files it has modified and what it was not able to merge, and in that which line has the problem. Okay, so how do I know that? So here it is first telling this file has a conflict, and if you look at the git status now, you can understand that actually it has modified the file, but it couldn't resolve because there was a conflict and it didn't know which line to take. So that's where, if you look at the file, it will clearly show you something like this. So what you need to understand here is it is dividing the content of the source branch and the destination branch. So it is trying to say that on the right arrow, whatever you see is your source branch. Okay, and the content of that in this line is iOS, whereas the left arrow indicates your destination branch, and in that the same line number has a different content. So that way, for every line where it is having this conflict, it is going to show. Now we have to choose accordingly and we have to do a manual merge. So this is where, suppose if I am the developer, then I have to choose which one I want or both, then change the content of the file or edit the file and then go ahead and do the commit. So I'll open the file. Now let's assume I want both of them. Then I'll just remove all these references, and now you're going to say git add and git commit. Okay, so this is how you need to understand. You will be getting conflicts because if the same file has different content, then it's going to be quite difficult because Git doesn't know. It's us who has written the file, so we know what is the content. So we need to work with the respective people on who own it. If not, we have to fix it by ourselves. Okay, so this is how merge happens from one branch to another branch. Okay. Okay.
That Adam, it means that when there is conflict in a file, so we can just see whether right and left hand arrow how many part is in which branch. According to that, we have to be just modified this one and do the git add. Is it?
Yeah, so you have to redo it again from the beginning because internally merge is trying to take the content, put into your destination branch and trying to do a commit. That is where it was asking for a message. Now because of the conflict, it just copied the file, but it couldn't proceed further, and that's where it stopped by saying conflict. So we have to fix it. So once we fix it, it is still available in our branch. So then it's a regular process where you have to add to the staging area and then do the commit. Okay.
Adam, I have a question.
Yes.
Say for example, I'm working on a program which for that I have created my local branch. Two branches are there, master branch, and one I have created of my branch of my own. So I move the things to my branch. Then from there, before trying to push it to the central repository, I'm copying it to the master branch, and from there I'm pushing. But before making the push, I found that I need to make some more changes to the program. So again, I follow the same practice and I come to my local branch. Now, when I have before making push to before making a copy merging to the master, is it possible I can drop the particular file from the master branch and then I can move that particular file to the master branch and then I do the push?
It's a different way, and that's what I'm going to come next. Okay.
Okay.
So now what we understood is if I want to take the changes from one branch to another branch, we do merge. But when you do merge, by default, what happens? at that time, whatever is available in the source branch, it is going to take everything which is not available in the destination branch and merge it. But the problem sometimes will happen is, if I am trying to do a merge wherein I want all the functionalities in one branch to another branch, it is okay. But if I come to this work, what I am trying to do, guys, can you mute? Okay, thanks for that. So now what happens is, now when I have created a branch which is for my purpose, and since I am not able to push it here, I am merging it to master. Now this is where I would have done so many changes for my trial and error purpose, and now when I merge, what happens? All those commit IDs is going to come to the master or to the destination branch. So this is where now you might not be interested to put all the commit IDs, because when you say merge, it takes all the commit IDs. So that's when you are doing the development work, you can also choose which commit IDs that you want, because especially here, if I say merge, it will do everything. But if you do not want to merge everything, but you have to do a selective merge, wherein you will choose which commit IDs that you want, then we have to use another option called git cherry pick. And for this, you are going to give the commit ID. So at a time, only one commit ID can be merged from source branch to destination branch. So this way, you have to choose all the branches and you have to do the cherry pick one by one. That will give you the flexibility. Rather than doing everything together, you can take only the corresponding commits that you are interested, which is good for you, and then merge. So to see that, what I'll do, I'll quickly go to iOS branch. Okay. Now, git log online. So we have so many commit IDs, right? Just to show you, I'll just create some random check-ins. Okay. So watch this, I'll do. So I'll say, do I need this one? Okay. And I'm just adding it. And I'll say commit. Okay, I'm just adding one dummy file first, and based on that, you can see we would have created a new commit ID. So like this, let me just create another file, and for that, we will try to say git add, and we will commit this. Now, again, for this, you would have got a new commit ID. Okay, same way, we'll create another commit with a new file. So now you can see we typically created 3 commit IDs. So if I go back to master and if I say merge, then it will try to take what? It will try to take all the 3 commit IDs. Now, instead of that, you can selectively choose a particular commit. Okay. So let's go to master. Okay. So now here, if I say git cherry pick, okay, and anyone has a preference? This 1, 2, 3, which one you want to take? Okay. No one has
one
will be better. Yeah.
Okay. Probably I'll show you both. Now I'll take one only first. So now see, when I merge this, what you have got only is that file. It didn't take everything. So this way, if I want, I can go ahead and pick the commit IDs one by one, and I can go ahead and merge only that. So that way, selective merge is what we call it as cherry pick. So this way you have the flexibility wherein you can merge everything, or you can merge a selected commit ID one at a time. And once you have done everything, now if I say git push, watch this, what is it going to show, see the output at the end. So if you haven't noted yesterday, now you note it. It is not just putting into your central repository, it is trying to put from your local repository a master branch to the master branch of the central repository. Okay, so this is how typically when you say pull and push, it happens between one branch in your repository to the same branch that is available in the central repository. And by default, it is going to be the same branch here and the central repository. So most of the cases you will be working, and for all these things, you are going to set the push.default as simple. Okay, so only on a complex scenario, you're going to take up a different repository that I'll show you a little later. But this is the basic functionality where when you work, you're going to work on a branch. So check out to that branch, modify the changes, check in, and push the change. The same way, if you want to switch to another branch, you can switch. But however, you can also merge the changes from one branch to another branch. And based on your need, it can be a selective merge or a complete merge together. Okay. Clear until this?
Adam, here we have not mentioned the destination branch. Commit ID is fine, but from which branch we are merging? If there is another branch, iOS 1 or 2, need to mention that branch, or how is it?
Will not be having multiple branches. There is going to be only one branch. Yes, what you brought up a question is, I'll talk about it little later on the next session, where it is not just what you're thinking is about a branch, it's a combination of a branch and repository, because every commit ID is being referred to a branch. Okay, so I'll talk about that also as we move forward. But typically what you should have understood today is branching is all about the actual place where you are going to store your commit IDs, where you are going to actually keep everything, and this is what you are also going to have in your central repository. But now logically, if you need to understand, if you want to create a branch for your own purpose, then Git gives you flexibility, because everything is available on your local repository. You own it, so that you can go ahead and modify. This is the biggest benefit in Git, which you don't have in other tool, because in that first you are going to create it, and from there you are going to create a copy which is going to be exactly the same, and then you can go ahead and start doing the changes. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Rakesh here.